Hi, it's Kate here. Just wanted to come to you quickly this afternoon just to chat a little bit about anxiety and what to tell kids and teens when it comes to anxiety. Now, one thing that I suppose I was thinking about is and uncertainty, and how that is a form of anxiety, and how at the moment there's lots of uncertainty around. So it might be something that has crossed your mind in terms of how do I talk to my kids about this? What do I talk to them about? What do I do if I'm noticing anxiety in my kids, or if I'm not noticing anxiety in my kids? Does that mean that anxiety is not affecting them? All that kind of stuff. So I thought I would just take you through a few general principles, I suppose, in terms of thinking about anxiety in kids and teens, and some things to be mindful of, or just wondering, sometimes people just ask the question, what do I say, or how much do I tell them, or that kind of thing. So often I'll ask families if they've been talking about, noticing anxiety in their kids. I'll sort of say, well, how do you describe it? What kind of words do you give it? And that's always a really interesting place to start to see what conversations have been had about it. Is it about a feeling that they're describing in their body, or have they actually given it a word or a name? So that would be sort of one of the first places I would start, is by thinking about helping your child identify what anxiety is to them. So can they describe it as a word? Can they describe it in their body? And if they are not able to, then you can start kind of having conversations with them around that. So sometimes that might be helped with books, sometimes that might be helped with drawing or artwork or a favourite toy, any of that kind of thing, just to help be really clear that you've got a good idea and understanding of what they're experiencing, what parts of the body they're experiencing, and you can help them kind of, if you kind of go, oh, that's anxiety, you already might have some knowledge about having anxiety, whether it's because you've maybe had it yourself as a young child, or whether you just recognise it from the words and the descriptions that they give you, or the circumstances in which they're describing it happening, when something new is happening, or when you're leaving them, or any other kinds of times and places. So begin by thinking about having a consistent way to describe it, and so you kind of know what it is that they're talking about, and affirm that that's an okay experience to have, and that it is really common. So that sort of brings me to the next part of, I suppose, what do we tell kids, is teaching them about their bodies, teaching them about their minds, and that anxiety, whilst a very uncomfortable emotion, it can happen in different varying amounts. So a little bit of anxiety might be called excitement or nervousness, whereas and also anxiety when it's attached to something like sports carnivals, for example, they've been on the last little while, that might be anticipation or excitement, kind of middled and muddled up together. And so kids can sometimes be able to sort of relate those things when there's a circumstance around that kind of triggers it, or if there's a test or an assignment, or having to do something like stand up in front of a class, they might kind of be aware that makes them feel nervous. So that's another kind of word that you could use to describe it in a different kind of setting. And sometimes there's the other kind of anxiety, which we sometimes label as worry, where kids seem to be having difficulty, whether it's dropping off to sleep, or they are talking about pains in the tummy, reluctant to go places or do things. And sometimes they can't put a clear kind of circumstance on it as much, but you might kind of notice that there's lots of worries popping up, whether it's about things that may be kind of relating to them in their day-to-day life, or sometimes it's about sort of more what seems random things, about something happening to you, or something maybe that seems kind of really far-fetched from happening, and so that their brains are kind of like just worrying about all kinds of possibilities happening. And again, linking that back to what body signals and what kind of things are happening, and that's all kind of fits under that same umbrella of anxiety. But there's different amounts, and there's different sizes and different things that kind of might trigger different types of anxiety. So also then you could be talking about how anxiety is really normal, and that in lots of instances it can be really helpful. Sometimes kids get really confused, like how can this be a good thing? So we then often try to teach them a bit about brains, and prehistoric brains in particular, because they're like our instinctual brains. And sometimes we might talk about the fight-flight reflex in dinosaurs, or perhaps way back in prehistoric human stage, when we were hunters and gatherers still, so we really were in survival mode a lot of the time. So we can kind of do some sort of explanation about how when we have this instinct, this survival instinct that keeps us safe, that fight, flight or freeze, we can teach them those three concepts depending on their age, and how that instinct helps us stay alive. And that prehistoric or that ancient instinct or that old brain instinct is still in us today, but we're not in that same kind of world where we have to fight another predator, or we have to kill our food to survive, or get away from predators. So we don't have that same need for that instinct, but it still exists in our mind, and it can sometimes get triggered by things our body and our brain thinks is an attack, or thinks that it's going to be harmful to us. So that kicks in our anxiety. And you can do a little bit of explanation depending on the age of the child about all the different kind of physical things that happen with anxiety: increased heart rate, increased muscle tension, increased breathing, and how that is preparing our body for that emergency, whether it's to fight or to run away, and how that's a really normal kind of response, and it means our bodies are working really, really well. But when they get triggered when there's no emergency, that's when all those feelings can feel very uncomfortable, and it kind of be kind of confusing about why is my body having this big stress response when I can't see any emergency around. And that can be confusing for adults as well, when we can kind of look around and say, hey, it's all fine, there's nothing to be worried about, because that's often the response that adults kind of give kids when they're looking anxious for no apparent reason. But what is happening is that something has triggered that anxiety response, and their body's just doing their thing. Their body's just doing their natural kind of mechanism of trying to keep you safe, but we don't need to be doing that. So we talk about sensitivities, and we can talk about different kinds of things that might accidentally trigger an anxiety response. And then when we have a bit more information about that, we can really normalize it and sort of say, there's nothing wrong with your body. It's just, it's been triggered. It either thinks it's in danger, or something in our environment, which means the world around us, is telling it that you're not safe, and it's trying to prepare you and keep you safe. So we've kind of got these instinctual things that happen, and then we either need to go, okay, what can we do to make us feel safer in that space? And sometimes that actually is adults supporting kids to make sure that they're not being triggered for whatever reason. And again, sometimes some sensory things could be under there. Sometimes there's information that we don't have the full picture of, what is happening at school or what is happening in this instance. Kids aren't always able to describe it in the same way that adults can. So it's sometimes important to kind of go, okay, something's happening there. Let's see if we can figure it out together, be a bit, be detectives together and try and unravel this. Other times we might never, fully know what that is. But certainly then you can go in and kind of go, okay, what is it like when you're calm? What kind of things make you feel calm? If our body gets tricked into thinking that you're in danger, what are some things that we could do to help calm it back down again? So then the next stage might be looking at helpful tools and things like that, whether they're thinking kind of tools, so skills of switching on our thinking parts of our brain to tell our instinctual part of our brain to calm down, or whether it's just going, let's come up with some things that make your body feel really, really good when we're feeling not so good with anxiety. So that could be moving the body in a certain way, that could be using a sensory tool or therapy tool, it could be using distraction, it could be all kinds of things. It would really be very individual for that young person. about what's going to maybe help. And then that just becomes part of your plan. So if you have a bit of an idea of what's happening to the body, normalizing about that anxiety happens to everybody, and it means that there's parts of your body and your brain that are working perfectly fine. What might be triggering it, and then if it does get triggered, and we maybe aren't always going to be able to remove all of those triggers and all of those things, then what are our tools? What's our plan going to be for if it turns up? Because if it turns up, it's better to have a plan, and just having that plan and being able to say we've got a bit of a thing that we're going to try can really help kids stop feeling anxiety as well. So again, it's not trying to say we're going to get rid of anxiety, because anxiety and its its function is important in lots of ways, and it actually is really beneficial for sort of revving our bodies up when we need to. But obviously if it's revving up too often and for lots and lots and lots of things, that's when we're starting to experience like anxiety disorders, and it's really debilitating. So helping them come up with a bit of a plan and saying that we're just going to try these different things, and it's not going to work 100% of the time, but we're going to get more information each time we try one of our strategies, and then we're going to figure out what helps and what maybe doesn't help so much. And so you're going to be sort of walking alongside them and helping them feel confident that they're going to have the skills to manage these ups and downs. Now, at the beginning, I talked about uncertainty and how, there's lots of uncertainty happening around, and that can kind of, be, I suppose, like this underlying sort of form of anxiety or unsureness or concern about unpredictability, not being able to kind of know exactly what's going to happen. Kids feel this. They probably don't always have the language to put it into those terms, but certainly adults around, particularly in these times, are feeling lots of uncertainty about, being able to be sure of the future and what to tell children and things like that. So certainly, even if your child doesn't have, an anxiety disorder or things like that, just talking about uncertainty and the impact of sort of prolonged uncertainty and unsureness and what has been happening could be really useful, and getting us to think about, how we manage that uncertainty, how we manage our own anxiety, and thinking about what kind of tools that you might already have in your toolkit, but perhaps we can bring out a bit more at the moment, because certainly finding ways to get calm, to get grounded, to, ignore sort of what if and racing thoughts and things like that is really, really important to have reduce that kind of stress hormone that gets created when we're in prolonged levels of uncertainty. We want to be able to come back to like a calm baseline, and that has been very difficult, I think, for people to do because of prolonged uncertainty that's sort of been happening around with lockdowns and all the COVID restrictions and things like that. Our usual ways of releasing energy, our usual ways of kind of finding joy and connection and things like that are really a lot more limited, or we're needing to be a lot more adaptive in terms of finding those things. So this is probably just a good reminder to bring yourself back to what has helped for you in the past, and together as a family even think about what tools you might be using together. I'm always a passionate advocate for thinking about mindfulness skills and how you can bring mindfulness and relaxation and those kinds of activities in. Kids often respond really well to sort of yoga, so you could do some family yoga together, have a laugh, and try something new if it's not something you've tried before. So that's all I'm going to talk about this Friday afternoon. I hope you have something enjoyable and calming and relaxing for you this weekend. And I look forward to chatting to you again soon. And just really quickly, if there's any families that are thinking that they would like some support in kind of talking and learning about some of this stuff, I've actually got a program of mine starting tomorrow, which is Spectrum Steps, which is designed as a planning kind of program program with parents looking at how to do some of the motion coaching stuff, how to understand anxiety, particularly for parents of kids who might be autistic or ADHD and things like that. So it's not too late if you're interested in joining us. We have our first Zoom tomorrow morning, but I've got the link on here if you're interested in joining me, or even down the track I do future parent coaching groups. Anyway, have a wonderful Friday afternoon, and I will see you next Friday. Bye.